righty, folks, welcome to Johnny D Talks to the Stars, and this time around, Wayne Herford is here to help me out with this interview. It's going to be a great one, Wayne.
Right.
You know who our guest today is?
Absolutely.
Bailey Howell from Mississippi State. Bailey Howell,
The great
NBA Bailey Howell. He's in Starkville right now. Welcome, Bailey.
Thank you.
Well, Bailey, let's just start. First of all, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Middleton, Tennessee. That's in West Tennessee, about 8 miles north of the Mississippi line on Highway 15. Walnut, Mississippi would be our closest city in Mississippi.
All righty. And basically, I mean, how did you get to Mississippi State eventually? How did you end up playing for Mississippi State?
Well, of course, I played high school basketball, and I was recruited by a number of coaches. Babe McCarthy was a new coach at Mississippi State, and he was sort of ahead of his time in recruiting, and in the fact that he made a lot more visits than the other coaches. He came to Middleton and met my parents. He brought his wife and his 2 little boys with him. He visited me more than all the other coaches combined, really. And he was sort of ahead of his time in how hard he worked at recruiting.
Right, Mr. Howell, Wayne Herford here. You mentioned Babe McCarthy. He's a legendary figure, of course, at Mississippi State. Tell the folks about Babe McCarthy and why he was such a great coach.
Well, actually, as far as X and O's, that wasn't his main ability. His main ability was keeping everybody happy and knowing how to handle people with different characteristics and personalities. And as he coached, I think his coaching career at Mississippi State was 10 years or more. I think that he probably got smarter and smarter as far as X and O's are concerned. But his main ability was being able to get along and handle people.
Well, and what stands out for when you were played for Mississippi State? Do you remember any big-time games that just stand out for you?
Well, of course, we played in the SEC. There wasn't as many teams then as now, but we played everybody at least once a year, and several teams in our division twice, home and home. So we had about I don't know how many SEC games we played each year, but we played like a 25 game schedule, and so we played a lot of teams that were not in the SEC as well.
So, sir, y'all, you were in the SEC in the time, I believe, if history served me correctly, was this the time when Coach Rupp up at Kentucky was sort of making his rise as well, and you guys probably had a few showdowns with Kentucky, is that correct?
Yes, of course, you couldn't play on the varsity as a freshman. So we had a freshman team at Mississippi State. We played other freshman teams like Alabama, Ole Miss, and others. We played about a 20-game freshman schedule. And then as a sophomore, you were able to play on the varsity. Okay. My first year on the varsity, Kentucky had to come to Mississippi State that particular year. We went to Kentucky my junior year, and Kentucky came back to Starkville on my senior season. So we won 2 out of 3 games against Kentucky when I was playing at Mississippi State.
Well, then came along the NBA after Mississippi State. I mean, 12 years in the NBA. I mean, almost 18,000 points, almost 10,000 rebounds. Can you tell us a little about your NBA days?
Well, in 1959, after I graduated with a degree, I was married during the summer. My wife and I, our honeymoon was driving to Detroit. I'd been drafted by the Detroit Pistons of the NBA, and so we settled in Detroit during the summer, getting ready for training camp in the fall. And so I spent 5 years in Detroit. My freshman year, of course, was a learning experience, but I was able to perform and provide some points and rebounds as a freshman, and I had a good 5 years in Detroit.
And then I guess after that you had Baltimore for a couple of years, right?
Yes. In Detroit, we were getting better each year. We finally was playing about 500 ball, but the Pistons were anxious, hopefully, to have a better team, a more competitive team. They made a trade with the Baltimore Bullets, which is now the Washington team. But anyway, there was 12 guys involved in this trade, so it almost traded teams.
that is trading teams. 12. My goodness, 12 folks. Today you're only like 2 or 3.
12 people.
My goodness.
Changed to teams.
Wow.
So most of the Baltimore Bullets went to Detroit, and most of the Detroit players went to Baltimore. So I spent 2 years in Baltimore, and then I was very fortunate to get traded into Boston after that.
And I guess with Boston, you ended up with 2 championship teams, right? 1966 and 69.
My first year in Boston had won 8 championships in a row, and Red Auerbach, their coach, had retired.
Oh.
So who was going to be the new coach in Boston? Well, Red Auerbach, of course, had a very close relationship with Bill Russell, who was the center for Boston and who was really the guy that made the Boston Celtics what they were. And so Red said to Bill, "Who will you play for now that I'm retiring?" And Bill said, "The only guy I'll play for is Frank Ramsey, who was a member of the team, of the Boston Celtics team, but had retired a couple of years before." Mm-hmm. So they went to and asked him if he would be the coach, and he turned them down. So they made Bill the coach, the player coach. So my first year in Boston, Bill was the player coach. In fact, the 4 years I played there, the first 3 years he was the player coach.
Yes, sir. I'm old enough to have remembered Mr. Howell as a kid. My dad and I and some neighbors, we'd sit around and watch you guys on Sundays on TV and play. And Bill Russell my dad was a huge Bill Russell fan. Of course, everybody else was. But talk about Bill Russell just as a competitor. I know he had some legendary battles with a person everybody knows, Wilt Chamberlain, who had like every record in the book. But could you talk about some of those matchups? There had to be, I guess, fun would be a good word to play.
Well, I think Bill Russell was the most valuable player that's ever played the game. In 13 seasons of his career, he won 11. He was on 11 world championship teams.
Wow.
my first year in Boston, he was a player coach, and believe it or not, we lost. So I seemed to be the kiss of death, I suppose. But we turned around, and the next 2 years we won the championship, and that was two of the greatest thrills that I had while I played in the NBA.
I would venture to guess also some more thrills would be you end up on 6 of the NBA All-Star teams during your career, correct?
Well, the All-Star is game, the East versus the West. It's played about middle of the year, and I was on 6 of those teams, which was a nice honor.
Not too shabby.
However, it wasn't a thrill that I enjoyed from winning those championships.
If you had to compare today's game to yesterday's game, I know you didn't have a three-point shot. I'm curious to know what you think. A guy, say, Jerry West, I don't know if you played with Pistol Pete, yes. Yeah, how many would Pistol Pete have averaged if he had a three-point line? I mean, I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Well, he would have averaged more than he averaged, which he had a great career.
Yes, sir.
He scored a lot of points. I don't believe he ever played on a championship team,
no,
but I'm not sure about that. Because once I retired from basketball, I didn't keep up with it very closely, and that's when Pete played most of his career. But anyway, the three-point shot has really changed the game, and I don't think for the better.
Okay.
If we would take some of those shots they take today, we would have been sitting on the bench.
Absolutely.
But it's amazing how well they shoot the three-point shot. Of course, that's all. It seems to be all that they practice. The little 15-foot jumper that we tried to get as close to the basket as we could before we shot. They don't shoot that shot very well today, but they shoot the lights out from three-point range.
Yeah, that mid-range jump shot, as you mentioned, I'm kind of a basketball buff myself. The lost art of the mid-range jump shot, I tell kids that I talk to play, if you learn to hit that mid-range shot, man, there's tons of points laying around just somebody to get if they want to get in there and learn to shoot a bank shot. Am I right, sir?
Yeah, well, of course, it only counts 2 points, but
good point.
They put the three-point shot in so that the smaller guys would have an opportunity to play.
Yes, sir.
So, of course, guards are getting bigger and bigger. We have some guards in the NBA today who are 6'9".
Oh, wow.
And the big guys are outside shooting the 3 points now. So everybody on the team is throwing up 3-pointers. You see, if you watch a game on TV, each team will put up about 40 of them.
That's true.
So it's just a shooting contest today, and I don't like the game nearly as much as I did when I was playing.
Yes, sir.
Well, what do you think about the officiating? I mean, I know we talked on the phone about this, the officiating like double dribble and traveling, I mean, which has gone out the window, you said today, not really being called much, is it?
Well, when I played, as you dribble the ball, you couldn't put your hand further down on the ball than the center of the ball, so to speak. But today they allow the players to reach down under the ball and turn it over every time they dribble. And what does that do? That makes it easier for them to play one-on-one and beat their man, being able to dribble like that. But if we dribble like that when I was playing, it was double dribble. So that's one other change in the game. But the biggest change, of course, is the 3-point shot, and they shoot way too many of those, I think. And the beauty of basketball, the give and go, and playing without the ball, getting open without the ball, is a lost art. They do, when they have their ball playing one-on-one, they're very good, but very few people know how to play today without the ball.
Right.
So, who would you say is the all-time great, the GOAT of all time, and modern day? Who do you see today standing out as being one of the best?
Well, of course, all the guys that are making the big money today are great players. Of course.
Yeah, the money makes it great. Yeah.
But anyway, I don't follow the games very close. So when I retired from basketball, I missed it so much that I just didn't keep up with it.
Okay.
So there's a lot of, but the great players in my area were, of course, Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Bob Pettit, and Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt was a rookie the same year I was a rookie. And a trivia question that very few people would believe is I was drafted before Wilt Chamberlain.
Wow.
My goodness.
Okay.
Back in those days, there was 8 teams. The league was struggling. Only a couple of teams had adequate funds, money. So the league was really struggling. And if a player was in within 100 yards, 100 feet, I think 100 miles of one of the teams, if the team wanted him when the draft day came around, they could claim a territorial draft. Wilt was a territorial draft for Philadelphia. Philadelphia didn't. Detroit drafted. Cincinnati had the first pick. Detroit the second pick, and Philadelphia picked about 5th or 6th. So Philadelphia claimed a territorial pick for Wilt, and so I was drafted by the Pistons, and I was drafted in before Wilt.
Yes, sir. Switching just a little bit to the modern day, do you know much about LeBron James and his son, who has now been drafted 55th to play with him on the Lakers? Have you kept up with that a little bit? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we'll just have to wait and see.
Okay, fair enough. No, that's a good question.
Evidently, he is a great player himself. I don't think he'll be as good as his dad, but it's going to be interesting to see how the other players respond to that as well.
Yes, sir.
Well, I was just thinking, we were talking also on the phone earlier before this meeting and talk right here. Basically, on the flights back in those days, I mean, it wasn't as easy to get around as it is today. Today, I mean, flying is much easier. Back in those days, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, I mean, how was it flying to all these different cities?
Well, the league had a rule. If you didn't have a game the night before the game, say we were going to be in Minneapolis on a Tuesday night to play the Minneapolis Lakers, we had to get there Monday night, unless we had a game Monday night. But if we had a game Monday night, you still had to get on a plane and leave after the game to get to the next city. So the owner of the Detroit Pistons was Fred Zollner, who had a piston company. He made pistons.
Oh.
And he was out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and he had a DC-3 that he flew on. If you know anything about airplanes, a DC-3 is probably has the best safety record of any plane that's ever flown, but it's very slow. But if he wasn't using his plane, then we made all of our trips on the DC-3. We could leave Detroit at night, headed for, say, Minneapolis, where we played the next night. It would take 4 hours to fly from Detroit
Wow.
to Minneapolis. And so, as you say, today they have much better travel arrangements than we had back then. We traveled on a plane at times. We traveled on other planes as well, but we were fortunate in Detroit that we all had access to the owner's plane, and we flew up very often on it.
Were there any games canceled because sometimes the team didn't show up? I mean, obviously, today you just hop on there, a couple of hours, you're across the country. But did that ever happen that you guys didn't make it on time?
Well, if bad weather approached, it wasn't very often that a game might have been canceled. But one night in Boston, we used to play a lot of doubleheaders. Not a lot, but a few doubleheaders.
Wow. That doesn't happen today.
Never.
And of course, the teams, the other three teams that were going to play that particular night had got there the night before. But the Pistons, the Celtics, we, of course, had to get to the arena, and a big, huge snowstorm came in off the coast.
My gosh.
And just shut the city down.
Oh, boy.
Well, my wife and I left our apartment to get to the Boston Garden, and we couldn't make it. So we went back and got on a Boston Main train. Now, the Boston Garden was built above a train station, so the Boston Main train went right in underneath the Boston Garden. However, with about 100 yards away, the track was frozen, and the train could not make it into the station. So we had to get off and walk over the railroad tracks the last 100, 150 yards to get to the game. Bill Russell was on the Mystic River Bridge, but he was by himself in his Lamborghini, and he wouldn't leave his car. He missed our game.
Oh my goodness.
And John Havlicek was on the same bridge, but his wife was with him. He got out of his car and walked in off the Mississippi River Bridge.
Oh, my.
So Russell was the only one that missed the game. But believe it or not, we won that particular night. The other team probably let down, thinking that we wasn't going to be as good without Russell, but we surprised them that particular night.
Well, it has been a pleasure, certainly, to have Bailey here. My goodness, what basketball history from the Mississippi State in the 50s to 60s and 70s with the NBA.
Yeah, great.
So, have you ever thought about writing books or anything like that about your career?
No, I had an offer from a person who wanted to write my autobiography, but I didn't think it would be that.
I think we think you'd have a good one.
So.
Oh, I think you'd have a great autobiography. Again, it has been.
So I said no, I wasn't interested, and so as of now, there's no autobiography in the works.
Well, I think we have an autobiography right here. I mean,
That's right. Beautiful.
we had a
Great.
great story today.
Fantastic.
So, Bailey, it has been a pleasure to have you on our show, and much luck to you, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, take care. God bless.
All right.